A lot of people think they're buying cheap Ozempic. What they actually found is a parallel market filled with telehealth funnels, compounding pharmacies, regulatory gray zones, and marketing that often borrowed trust from drugs that they actually did not use. And this got big enough that companies people actually use, like Henry Meds, Mochi, Hims, Fella, Willow, that ended up in lawsuits with warning letters, or sometimes even both. Hi, I'm Dr. Neeraj Patel. I'm a physician, I'm an entrepreneur. I spend a lot of time thinking about how health products actually work, and sometimes how they're marketed. And this is exactly the type of story that sounds simple until you actually look at it. Because this is not a video about if GLP meds work or not. They do. This is about whether compounded GLP-1s deserve to borrow trust from medications like Ozempic, Zepbound, Mounjaro, and Wegovy. First, one very important distinction. Compounded does not mean generic. A generic drug has to prove equivalence to the original product. A compounded drug does not. The FDA's own language here is pretty blunt. Compounded drugs are not FDA approved, and FDA does not verify their safety, effectiveness, or quality before they're marketed. That one misunderstanding carries a lot of this market. A compounded GLP-1 is not just a cheaper version of Ozempic. It's a separate product made through a different route. In principle, compounding has a legitimate medical role. If a drug isn't available or a patient needs a customized formulation, compounding can fill the gap. And this is exactly why compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide exploded during shortages. They offered a cheaper, easier, and more available workaround when branded drugs were hard to get. But the moment a workaround gets sold at scale, like a consumer product, you're no longer just talking about access. You're talking about an entire parallel supply chain. And here's a nuance almost nobody explains. Not every compounding facility is the same. A 503A pharmacy is usually a state-licensed pharmacy, mainly overseen day-to-day by the State Board of Pharmacy. A 503B pharmacy, on the other hand, is a separate category that registers with the FDA. It's inspected by the FDA on a risk-based schedule and is subject to good manufacturing practices. That still does not make a compounded product FDA approved. And it absolutely means where did this come from is not a minor question. Facility category is not everything, but it isn't nothing. This is the part that gets blurred in marketing. People hear semaglutide and think molecule equals certainty. But in medicine, names are not enough. The form matters. Manufacturing matters. Purity matters. Delivery matters. The ADA specifically advised against use of a non-FDA approved compounded incretin product because of uncertainty about their content and concerns about safety, quality, and effectiveness. And the statement also notes that some compounders have used salt forms like semaglutide sodium or semaglutide acetate or added ingredients like B12 or B6, which means the compounded product is not necessarily the same as the FDA-approved formulation that was actually studied. Zepbound's trial data belongs to Zepbound. It doesn't automatically transfer to every vial sold online with a similar sounding ingredient. The most seductive lie in health usually isn't a fake drug. It's a real drug class attaching itself to a weaker product and stronger marketing. If you like products that separate the molecules from the marketing, subscribe. That's basically the whole project here. Here is where this stops being theoretical. A lot of consumers thought they were buying a medicine. In practice, they were also buying a math problem. Milligrams, milliliters, units, different vial concentration, self-drawing from a syringe. The FDA warned about dosing errors with compounded semaglutide, including cases where patients got the wrong dose and ended up hospitalized. And the FDA specifically linked the problems to patients measuring and self-administering incorrect doses and to clinicians miscalculating doses. And that is not a small detail. That is the difference between a medication and a medication process. And medication processes fail all the time. People don't just buy a compound. They buy a chain of assumptions. The reason this category of drugs grew so quickly is not hard to understand. The branded drugs worked. Demand exploded. Insurance coverage was inconsistent. The prices were brutal. And the supply lagged. So a parallel market stepped in. And they said, we can get something close enough. And once telemedicine companies realized that this wasn't just a treatment category, but a subscription funnel attached to one of the hottest drugs in the world, the incentives changed. Most health markets don't start with fraud. They start with a real problem. Then it drifts into a story that's too profitable to interrogate. One of the easiest ways to understand a market is to watch where the lawsuits are clustered. And in April of 2025, Eli Lilly sued Mochi, Fella, Henry Meds, and Willow over compounded tirzepatide offerings, alleging they were selling unapproved versions and in some cases using oral forms or added ingredients not present in Lilly's approved products. And a separate legal summary of those cases stated Lilly also pushed a deeper theory, not just false and misleading marketing, but possible corporate practice of medicine problems. Basically, whether non-clinician business entities were influencing dosing or formulation decisions that should be medical decisions. And Hims became the highest profile semaglutide example. The FDA sent Hims a warning letter in September 2025 saying its claims about compounded semaglutide were false or misleading. Then in early 2026, Hims launched a $49 compounded GLP-1 pill. Novo threatened legal action, and Hims pulled the product days after the FDA escalated its crackdown. And that's the pattern: arbitrage, tension, and then enforcement. And to be precise, these lawsuits contain allegations, not final findings. But even allegations can tell you something. They show you where the market got aggressive enough that major players and regulators decided to enter the fight. This is where the story changes. Under federal law, compounding gets more legal room when a drug is actually on the FDA shortage list. The FDA said the tirzepatide shortage ended in October of 2024 and later said the semaglutide shortage had resolved as supply stabilized. It also set wind-down timelines for many compounded copycat products. That matters because workarounds during a shortage is one thing. A permanent mass market substitute after shortage resolution is a totally other thing. Then in March 2026, the FDA said it had sent warning letters to 30 telehealth companies for false or misleading claims about compounded GLP-1 products. The FDA also got unusually explicit. Companies cannot market non-FDA approved compounded GLP-1s as generic versions, cannot say they are the same as FDA approved drugs, cannot say they use the same active ingredient, and cannot claim they're clinically proven for the patient the way approved drugs are. That's the government telling you in plain English where marketing crossed the line. The useful question here isn't, should we all panic? It's, what would a rational adult do knowing all this information? To look at things from the other side, Compounding does have its role in medicine. During genuine shortages for specific patient needs, compounding can serve a real benefit. Telehealth can also reduce the friction of being seen in person and expand access to obesity care. The problem is that sometimes under specific constraints is a much more narrow claim than basically the same as Ozempic. A niche exception is not the same thing as a mass market equivalence claim. When evaluating health information practically, we should look at it through the lens of a few filters. First, evidence. What evidence actually belongs to this GLP-1 formulation, not just the GLP-1 drug class? Second, the source. Who actually compounded it? Is it a 503A pharmacy or a 503B outsourced facility? Can they clearly explain the concentration, the units, the syringe measurements, and exactly what's in the vial? If the platform makes it easy to check out but hard to identify the actual compounder, that's not a small omission. That's the supply chain disappearing when you need trust the most. Third, the incentives. Is this being offered as a careful medical workaround or as a scalable growth product, pretending the uncertainty has already been solved? And that last question matters more than people think. GLP-1s are real. Their effects are real. But compounded GLP-1s expose something bigger. In modern healthcare, the product people buy is often not just a molecule. It's a supply chain, it's a regulatory category, a dosing system, and a story. And if you can't see those clearly, the story starts doing more work than the science. Evidence first, marketing second. Always. See you in the next one.